So after Vinicius lost the Ballon d'Or to Rodri in 2024, a lot of people were extremely angry and disappointed by the outcome of the award. And what can only be described as an act of protest, people started to compare Vinicius to other Brazilians who won with similar numbers, mainly Ronaldinho. But was this actually a good comparison? Was Vinicius actually as good as Ronaldinho back in 2005, or was this just another oversimplification? Well, how about we take a look at the evidence? One of the first things that caught people's attention with this comparison was their goal contribution during the years in question, and how because Vinicius played less games while having more goal involvement, this makes this a conversation worth having. However, unlike a Salah versus Hazard comparison, where the difference between the amount of goals that they are involved with is so great, it makes it a better debate, one between a goal-scoring winger and a playmaking winger. The difference between Vinicius and Ronaldinho is too close, which makes it really hard for you to argue in Vinicius' favor. As a goal-scoring winger, a playmaking winger shouldn't have as many goal contributions when compared to you in a debate. If they do, that usually means that you are not really that good of a goal-scoring winger, or that playmaker is just really good. So essentially, from a statistical standpoint, Vinicius should have been miles ahead of Ronaldinho, but he's not, which already isn't a good sign for Vinicius. But what about the eye test? Surely Vinicius is just as skillful as Ronaldinho, right? Well, this is why the result of the first section is so concerning, because unlike Vinicius, Ronaldinho is not just a playmaker. He's also one of the most skillful players ever. Well, let me explain. Majority of playmaking wingers are better than goal-scoring wingers when it comes to the eye test, and this is no exception. For example, when it comes to passing, which is a key component of the eye test, Ronaldinho is the winner without much debate at all. His passing is just much more accurate, and it's also more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. For example, he averages 2.9 chances created per game in the Champions League during that year, compared to Vinicius' 2.3 chances created per game. And this is while having roughly the same amount of pass success rate whenever they attempt a pass. This is really impressive because for one, Ronaldinho in this period was basically inventing random stuff on the field whenever he's playing, when Vinicius is playing the modern game, which is all about efficiency and outcome. So the fact that he was able to have virtually the same amount of passing rate just shows you just how good he was at passing. And if you think this was because he played less game during the Champions League in that season, during the next season where Ronaldinho won the UCL, his numbers were basically the same. So this is not really a good rebuttal. When it comes down to dribbling, Ronaldinho is essentially playing a different sport. That's how good that guy really was, especially when compared to Vinicius. During their UCL season, Vinicius had 3.7 successful dribbles per game and had a success rate of 51%. But Ronaldinho was on a whole different level. He had 5.9 successful dribbles per game with a success rate of 64%. I was also able to get my hands on their La Liga stats as well for that year. Although Vinicius does have more successful dribbles in La Liga, the gap between them in the UCL is just far too great. Even when taking into account the aesthetics, which is their dribbling animation, Ronaldinho is just more entertaining and better to look at. For strength and skill, one of the things that Ronaldinho was praised for was his ability to stay on his feet when tackled to take advantage of a good situation. And while I would say that Vinicius does do that from time to time, I think Ronaldinho have the edge here in this section. I'm sure it's not a stretch to say that Ronnie was much more of a physical player during his prime, and was dealing with way more aggressive players when compared to Vinicius in the 2023-2024 campaign. And in regards to tricks and skills, I don't think I need to explain to anyone why Ronaldinho is essentially a god here. The only thing that Vinicius is better at when talking about the eye test is his raw speed and at shooting. As stated before, the only thing I could find on the internet for Ronaldinho's speed is 32 kilometers per hour, meaning it would be impossible for Ronnie to beat Vinicius in a foot race, seeing that Vinicius is one of the fastest players in the league right now. And as far as shooting is concerned, Vinicius did score more goals while playing less games, and he also didn't need as many shots to eventually score a goal, which is expected coming from a goal-scoring winger. So unless it's a prime Cristiano versus an Eden Hazard, there aren't many goal-scoring wingers that's better at the eye test than playmaking wingers. So again, there is no real comparison here. The only real thing that's left that you can use to argue in Vinicius' favor was his impact on his team. And now your mind is probably thinking about Vinicius' Champions League performance for Real Madrid. But again, it's really hard to argue in Vinicius' favor here because of his statistical impact. Let me explain again. Because Ronaldinho and Vinicius' direct goals is so close, it is hard for us to say that Vinicius have a bigger impact on his team based on the fact that the amount of goals that Ronaldinho is involved with indirectly is probably much more higher than Vinicius based on the fact that he's a playmaker. It is much more likely that Ronaldinho had a bigger impact on his team. And this is without us taking into account the team's balance or the fact that Ronaldinho was probably controlling the tempo of the team. There is also other evidence that points into this direction as well. Even when looking at how Real Madrid performed during the league and the Champions League, if Vinicius was actually removed, it is very likely that they still would have won the league just based on how good their team was overall compared to everyone else. However, in Ronaldinho's case, it is probably the opposite. Removing Ronaldinho from that team, Barcelona goes trophyless. And that's just what it is. Even if for some reason you want to talk about their performances for a single game, for a tournament, and for a season, Vinicius is just outclassed. For a single game, Vinicius had really good games that he played a key role in, like his match against Bayern Munich where he scored 2 goals, or his game against Barcelona in the final of the Supercopa, where he scored a hat-trick in the first half. These are some really good games that Vinicius played during that year, but he really wasn't that impressive outside of the fact that he was scoring a lot. Because of Ronaldinho's involvement in each game and the fact that his goal contribution is so close to Vinicius, he had games where he was so much more enjoyable to watch while also having roughly the same impact directly on goal. For example, his game versus Chelsea in the round of 16 in the UCL. Although Barcelona did lose that game, Ronnie was just way more involved in the game while also scoring 2 goals for Barcelona. And if you rewatch Barcelona versus Real Madrid in match week 12 in La Liga, with a goal and also an assist for Ronaldinho, this is just a much better game compared to anything else Vinicius have up his sleeve. The same can also be said about their league performances as well. Although Vinicius did play less games while scoring more goals in La Liga during that season, their overall goal contribution is just way too close to argue in Vinicius' favor. Because as I said before, I could easily make the argument that because of how involved Ronaldinho really was, he was probably way more involved in Barcelona's goals indirectly when compared to Vinicius for Real Madrid. The only thing that Vinicius really performed better at was his UCL performance. With 11 goal contributions in 10 games, Vinicius was a really big part of Real Madrid's win. There is just no real argument to be made in Ronnie's defense, seeing that Barcelona during that season was blown away by Jose Mourinho's Chelsea. So essentially, this is a really one-sided affair, which proves why goals and assists alone shouldn't be used out of context when comparing 2 players, because in most cases, This is just one small part of a massive and complex story. So yeah, if you like the video and want to see more, subscribe and comment down below who you would like to see next. And as always, thanks for watching.